Let's get ready to RPG!
RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG!
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Knights of Last Call. My name is Derek Melinda. Wishing you all a very happy Thursday. Glad to see you all here. I am very excited to be joining you this evening. It's going to be a pretty low-key night, actually. You know, we had a pretty busy week. I'm feeling a little, just a little run down, a little worn down, I suppose would be the way I would describe it. We finished Root on Tuesday. It was a whole whirlwind of experiences, and actually we'll talk a little bit tonight because there's a lot of comparisons to be made between Powered by the Apocalypse and Blaze in the Dark, and especially in comparing a game like Root, which is sort of a post-Renaissance PBTA game. You know, there's sort of the beloved, you know, many of my favorite Powered by the Apocalypse games sort of came out before, you know, 2014, 2015, 2016, when, you know, everyone was really just doing variations on, you know, what Vincent Baker and Miguel Baker had done in Apocalypse World. And then John Harper came out with Blaze in the Dark. And although it kind of was technically Powered by the Apocalypse, it really became its own thing, right? So much so that, you know, they talk about it being a forged in the dark game, or FITD, you might see it referred to, which is to say that it uses a strategy. Now the truth is, if you look under the hood, and even the odds, by the way, even the percentages, Blaze in the Dark actually is very similar to PBTA, at least in terms of the dice and the outcomes. But that being said, there are some key differences, and there's some reasons why, you know, Root really sort of reiterated to me that I still prefer, I think, to play Forged in the Dark games. Not for every single instance, but I think overall, I think it's a little bit, for me, it is a better system. And we can, and some of those are very specific reasons, and we can definitely talk about those. But yeah, so next Tuesday, normally would be our root game, but our root game finished. I'm pretty sure Smith is going to be in studio with me, and he and I think are going to just talk. We're going to kind of do it. Maybe Bob will come in, and we're going to do like a debrief of the root game. So, and we're going to talk about, this is something I do even in my real games, for my like home games that I've been doing forever, which is, what worked, what didn't work, what did we like, what did we not like? Just because I enjoyed a campaign doesn't mean that I think the system is perfect. Oftentimes, and I'm sure all of you can agree with this, how good a game is sometimes has very little to do with the actual system itself. So we're going to take that opportunity to sort of look into that. So yeah, so tonight, like I said, low key. I'm feeling a little, I don't want to, under the weather, more like really drained after just a long, busy week. And we've got a nice kind of quiet topic tonight that usually doesn't generate too much buzz in the YouTube land. So hopefully we can just have a nice conversation about Forged in the Dark games, but specifically, I do want to talk a little bit about this game, Scum and Villainy, a Forged in the Dark role-playing game by Stras Asimovich. And this was kind of like the first. This is kind of like the first Blades in the Dark spin-off game. And of course, it was helped by the fact that Stras is was a play tester, part of John Harper's core group of players and play testers for Blades in the Dark. So Stras definitely knows their way around the system. But they did a couple of things that are interesting in here, and I'd like to talk about them. Of course, if you're familiar with this channel, you've definitely heard stories about Scum and Villainy before, including the infamous landing gear incident, which we can talk about a little bit. Let me say hello and hi to everybody. Frostjack, hello. I am sorry that it is going to rain all day. I like the rain. So it's been very hot here all week, and I think it's supposed to rain the next couple days. I hope it does. Frosty, hello, sir. Glad to have you. Darth Gorlock, who has been pushing for another Forged in the Dark stream. And I would say, at least in the Knights of the Last Call pantheon of pro gamers, is definitely one of our biggest pro Forged in the Dark sort of believers or true believers. Janka, what's up? KC, already making fun of landing gear. Love it. That's all right, Isaiah. We'll have some post-stream beats for you as well. Let's see here. Henry, welcome. Glad to have you here, buddy. Missing. I can't believe it's only been it's just been exactly a month since Gen Con, Henry, and it feels like it has been 10 years. Crazy. Let's see here. Janka says that Wicked Ones felt pretty different from Dungeon World, and not just in the tone only. PBTA and Forged in the Dark games that I played. Interesting. All right. Well, I mean, Wicked Ones definitely does take a sort of a different premise. Ooh, we got a fly flying around here. Pumpkin had to cancel their Blades game tonight because of bad weather. Oh, that sucks. Let's see here. Let's see here. Ken, hello. Good to see you. Gossamer, welcome back. And Lollipop is here. Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you everybody for showing up. Vaughn Gifford in the chat. May I promote Heidi Gygax? I don't know what that means. I think Heidi Gygax is Gary Gygax's daughter. Marvelous Mr. Mean. Hello. All right. So, again, there's probably only going to be 30 or 40 of us here tonight. So you tell me if there's anything that you specifically want to kind of get into. I've got the whiteboard ready. I've got my PDF kind of browser up. But if there's something specific, a question, put it in chat, use question, and we can use that to locate you. And if you want to throw some love or some support, my way, like Gossamer just did. Thank you, Gossamer. Hoping you can take a night off if you're feeling drained. Sending love heart. I was just talking to a friend this week about how, streaming is not my full-time job, but I'm certainly committed to it. I'm committed to my patrons and trying to make it a good, fun experience for everybody. And I try to get out minimum two, but ideally, more like 2.5 live streams a week over the course of the month as it averages out. And of course would love to do more stuff, more videos and all that other stuff. But, I honestly, I feel like, cause again, I don't need, there's people who do this like as their job, and taking a night off streaming means, not getting a paycheck, maybe not making rent. But the truth of the matter is I look forward to these conversations with you all. I love gaming. I've been talking about if I wasn't talking to you all right now, I would just be in a Discord talking to Smith. And I would just be being like, the thing about Forged in the Dark games is, and I would be saying the same stuff I'm saying right now. So, in a sense, this is kind of a way for me to kind of relax. So I like it. So one of the things, Frosty, hey Derek, is Dirt the owner of a gaming store? I would say part owner of a gaming store. But yeah, he is the basically sole employee / solo manager / operating partner, I would say, of a gaming store. But that is true. He is. Great Lakes Game Emporium in Menor, Ohio, actually just a stone's throw from the studio where we record. And, Dirt is an old friend of mine, and I've known him through the Magic the Gathering circles for a long time. So, when we were looking for people to hang out with us and play, a short campaign, I don't like to ask people to commit for too much. 30 or 40 or 50 sessions of an RPG could be a pretty tall ask for anybody. But I said, hey, this will probably only be, 5, 6, 7 sessions. Come in, have fun, hang out, and, maybe make a couple bucks as well, depending on how we do on tips. And so, hey, who can be mad about that? So it was fun to have him in there, and, I'm sure we'll get him onto a future stream. But thank you. Yeah, he is. They definitely are what I would call my FLGS, Great Lakes Game Emporium, or Mr. Cards and Comics, located in Lyndhurst, Ohio. All right. Well, where do you all want to go? Let me put the poll up. We can talk about Scum and Villainy. We can talk about why I like Forged in the Dark more than PBTA. And we could also talk about specifically Forged in the Dark mechanics. So let me know what you think. Hey Whitney, would you guys ever consider running a masks / superhero campaign? So it's funny that you asked that, because for a long time, superhero games were kind of all that we played. And we kind of gave up on fantasy for a long time, and we really pretty much exclusively played superhero games. And that mostly meant playing them as mutants and masterminds. And we played 1st edition, 2nd edition, and 3rd edition. And I think we've probably done 6 or 7 campaigns of that over the last 10 plus years, maybe more like 15 years, I guess now time has gone on. We played a Fate game in there, but I am aware of Masks. Masks does something slightly different than what we kind of traditionally do with our superhero games. But the short answer is I love superhero games. I think they're a lot of fun, but I would be very hesitant to run one in Mutants and Masterminds again. Now, I love Mutants and Masterminds. It is one of my favorite games of all time. But I'm just at a point in my gaming career where that kind of game, and to say that, is going to be very, very point accounting and, I want 3 points of flight and 7 points of laser blast, and I want 2.5 points of super toughness, like that kind of very minutia. I mean, to use a derogatory term,
Darth Glock tip $25. Gotta show some support as we get into the fit discussion.
Thank you. Appreciate the support, especially since you've been always asking for it. But, derogatory in the sense of like, people say, oh, you don't play Pathfinder, you play Path Builder, right? People just like building characters and spending all their feats and, oh, I want free archetype because I want more feats. Mutants and Masterminds would be like the perfect game for them because it's very fiddly. And, but I'm more interested in, and even when we played Mutants and Masterminds, it became a little bit more loosey-goosey. And so I'm just more interested in sort of loosey-goosey type games, which isn't to say that Masks isn't that by far. I think Damien's here. Yeah. And he had his member chat and he said, Sentinel Comics live series. Damien and I went through that. I think we did a 2 or 3 part series about the Sentinel Comics RPG. I was pretty impressed. I thought it had a lot of promise, and it definitely is more in the line of kind of where I'm kind of at in terms of what I want out of a superhero game. But there are quite a few out there. But basically, long story short, I want a superhero game that is less about choosing right powers and knowing exactly how many pounds my Superman can lift, and I really want to focus more on the sort of emotional side, which could promote Masks, but there are also elements about Masks that make me a little hesitant to play it, but mostly because it's Monster Hearts, but with superheroes, which is fine. That's a great game. That's a cool concept. But for me, superheroes isn't necessarily the same thing as young teenage superheroes struggling to accept who they are and what they are. And, that's a different kind of set of criteria for a game. Anyways, that was a long diatribe there, but thank you. Darth says, I was asking about questions. I think there was a question in the Discord about clocks in general. I think talking about Forged in the Dark mechanics you can rip from other games would also be nice. Yeah, that's true. Apparently Heidi Gygax is going to be on another YouTube stream in 1 hour. Well, if you think I'm boring and you don't want to see me talk anymore, you can always go check that out. So Vaughn, feel free to drop a link in the chat. It might not let you because it's to prevent bots and stuff. But thank you again for that tip, Darth Gorlock. All right. All right, let's see what we got here. Well, 44% want to talk about Forged in the Dark mechanics. Okay. Well, we can kind of get into that. And actually, this is a cool thing I want to talk about. Combat and tactics Forged in the Dark. And I know that sounds kind of silly, but this is like a particular, okay, how do I put this gently? How do I put this nicely? A particular pet peeve of mine is when people play narrative games and they play them badly. Just because a game is a narrative game doesn't mean that there still isn't a game component to it that you, in my personal opinion, should be trying to win. Now, the way a narrative game is going to approach this is going to require or necessitate or even inspire you to do certain narrative or sort of story-based components to your actions. But that doesn't mean that a game isn't still a game. And that, I guess what I'm trying to say is I see sometimes people complain about these kind of games and about how they feel like they don't have the same breadth of options that they might have in, say, a D20 game or like Pathfinder or Dungeons & Dragons. And the truth of the matter is, to be clear, you don't. But the truth of the matter is, a game like Pathfinder 2, between me and you, once you pass level 10, you have more things than you ever would possibly know what to do with. So these games do have a lot of mechanical depth, and there is ways to build good characters. Just because a game is don't confuse a game with a high end score, narrative score, something that would be like Dread, where your character sheet is just 10 questionnaire. It's a 10 question questionnaire. or a game like Fiasco, where you literally don't have a character sheet. You're just playing your character and collecting white dice or black dice to determine how does my story end up at the end of this one-shot session. No, this is a real game with character sheet, with character advancement, with options to let you grow. And the reason why I bring this up is because if you look at Root, that we just finished, which is a Powered by the Apocalypse game, but it's in the same kind of genre, where there were, and we were talking about this in the very last session. We finished up, we wrapped up, and then we kind of talked about the game for about half an hour. And we talked about how certain characters had, one of the key things in the game is exhaustion, which is kind of like your focus points. It's like your power pool. And if you want to do cool stuff, you need to spend exhaustion. And once you're out of exhaustion, you're kind of unable to do anything cool, and you're on the verge of unconsciousness. Well, the game gives you this really quick, easy way to recover all of your exhaustion, and that's by fulfilling your nature. So the game is encouraging you, rewarding you for choosing a nature and then following that nature, because that's going to give you that sort of refresh. And I would say that part of the skill of playing a game like Root is choosing a nature that is going to be useful and appropriate for the way that you and your character and your party are operating, and also manufacture and push to create specific instances in which your nature is going to come up so that you can, trigger it and use it. So yeah. So let's kind of talk about something here. We're going to be kind of off the beaten track here. Let me go over to the PDF browser. We may end up going to the whiteboard. We'll see. Let me open up. I think I need a Scum and Villainy character sheet. Okay, because I want to talk a little bit about how these games should work and do work, and all that stuff. Geesh, where's the playbooks here? Geesh. Oh. Apparently, I'm having a hard time finding. I don't know why I don't have the Scum and Villainy playbooks on my computer. I don't want to buy the character sheets. Oh, here we go. That's weird how they have those written. Okay, got them. It was very weird how they wrote that. Okay. Took me a minute there. Sorry about that. Okay, and boom, there we go. Okay. So we've got character creation. All right. And let's get into the nitty gritties of it. And again, some of this is information for you here at home. If you don't know how this game works, then feel free to ask a question. I'll be happy to try to answer it as best as I can. So let's start off with your character. Your character's actions, not stats. They're called actions. So in Scum and Villainy, we have a list of actions that are going to be all of the things that we do in the game. We are going to attune. We are going to command, consort, doctor, hack, helm, rig, scramble, scrap, skulk, study, or sway. And, long story short, this is the game kind of telling you this is what the game cares about. The game cares about these things. And these are the kind of dangerous, exciting things that, characters might get up to in a game of Scum and Villainy. So that is why they are called actions. Gossamer, with their member for 3 months, Adventure Chat, thank you. Jumping off to watch the NFL season kickoff game. Bob would understand. Bob, I don't think is a huge football fan. He's a baseball fan. He's really a big baseball fan. He's not much of a basketball fan. He's not much of a football fan. His wife is a bigger football fan actually than he is. But I appreciate that you enjoy the game, and that's cool. So I look forward to you watching the VOD later. So when you make your characters, you have the ability to put points into your actions, and these are called action ratings. And I wish this was form fillable, but it is not. Maybe Scum and Villainy form fillable playbooks. I don't know. Doesn't look like there is one. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to kind of cheat a little bit. I'm going to go into the whiteboard. Yeah. How about that? All right. We're doing it. Something. We're doing something. I don't know what we're doing, but we're doing something. Okay. Come on. I believe in you. There we go. Okay. So in our game here, we have these different actions. Okay. And there are 4 per category. All right. And you can see here that each of these 4 actions falls under something that is called a attribute. I think it's the right term. I don't want to get it wrong. And these kind of, roughly speaking, sort of divide an action into sort of, I guess you would say, smarts, physicality, and then sort of, you would say like, charm or presence, right? And one of the big mistakes that I see people make with this game is during character creation, you get a number of points or dots, if you want to call them, to take additional skills, or actions as they are called. And the number of filled in triangles that you get is the number of D6s that you get to roll when you attempt that action. And of course, remember that you are going to then, you might roll 1d6 if you only have, 1 dot filled, but you would roll 2d6 if you have 2 dots filled. So a common mistake that people make is they go, well, I want to have the highest possible number because, I want to have the best chance of succeeding. But remember, in this game, when you roll a pool of dice, if the highest die that you have is 1, 2, or 3, that is when you have your failure. And I use the term loosely because the GM gets to make their decision, their consequence. On a 4 to 5, you succeed, but at a cost. And on a 6, you just straight up succeed. And because people come from D&D and because people are used to thinking that, success equals, this isn't a real success, this is a real success, there is a strong temptation to, you should be trying to avoid 1, 2s, and 3s. But I think you should really consider that 4, 5, and 6 are really the success conditions. And you shouldn't necessarily be afraid of getting a 4 or a 5. So going back to our point, your odds with 1 dot of getting a 4, 5, or 6 is 50%. And furthermore, your odds of getting a 4, 5, or 6 with 2 dice is 75%. So just with 2 dots, you are already at 75%. But there is something here that a lot of people miss, and it's very subtle. And we're just talking Forge in the Dark mechanics here. We're just talking like into the nitty gritty. So all of that is good. And, and obviously too, like the more dice you have, the more chance that you're going to have a better result. But I should also point out that there are diminishing returns. For example, if we were to go up to 3 points of hacking, then our odds of success would still increase, but they would only increase to about 87%. So you can see that just one die gives us 50%. If we add a second die on top of that, now it goes up a 25% to 75%. And if we go up another die on top of it, we still continue to go up, but we're already at 87%. Now, don't get me wrong. Getting 4, 5s, and 6s is a good thing, and you should be trying to do it. But it is cheap. It is easy, in my personal opinion, to get bonus dice in Forged in the Dark games. You can spend stress to get bonus dice. You can have somebody else aid you to get a bonus die. You could take a devil's bargain to get a bonus die. So there are a lot of different ways that you can use in order to get an extra bonus die. So to go from 1 dot to 2 dots is a lot easier when you are, spending these sort of stress, or you're spending a devil's bargain, than just having it in your character sheet. So why am I bringing all of this up? Well, this is just because in case you don't know how the game works. But one thing that people neglect, and this is kind of what I was getting to, where people go, oh, it's a narrative game and it doesn't matter. In this game of Forged in the Dark, if you make an action roll, you may succeed, right? And you might get what you're after. And depending on how you roll, it might generate a consequence. Now, a consequence in this game is basically anything that happened because of your die roll that you don't like. It could be you getting shot. It could be that the vizier recognizes you and knows who you are. It could be that as you're escaping, you leave behind your pocket watch for evidence. It could be that your ion engines leave a trail that someone's going to follow. Like, do you remember Empire Strikes Back? Okay. They're escaping and Han goes, I'm going to escape. And the GM says, okay, you're going to try to outmaneuver the, Imperial. He's like, yeah, I'm going to fly real low, wait for the Imperials to drop their garbage, and then I'm going to power off. And I go, awesome, cool. Well, normally I would ask, for a helm check here, but I think skulk is more appropriate. And then, Han Solo says, yeah, I totally agree. So Han Solo rolls let's say Han Solo has 2 dice in skulk. So Han Solo rolls his 2 dice in skulk, and he gets a 5 and a 3, which means that his highest result is a 5. So he succeeded, but with a cost. What happens? Well, the Imperials fall for it. They jump to hyper light speed after dropping away all their garbage, and the Millennium Falcon just drifts away with the garbage and takes off. But there's a consequence. There's a complication. What? The notorious bounty hunter for Jabba the Hutt, Boba Fett, is you could think like, we know that, George Lucas wrote that script, but if we're not writing that script, why does Slave One appear there? Why is Boba Fett in that? Why did Boba Fett know that is what Han Solo was going to do? Well, he didn't, right? George Lucas wrote it that way. But in Forged in the Dark games, if we're playing Scum and Villainy and that exact scenario came out, and if I rolled a 5, I might say the consequence is, Boba Fett is tracking you. He was hiding. He knew what you were going to do, and he's hiding out. So the players got what they wanted. They got their success, but it did generate a consequence. So again, a consequence can be anything. It could be you getting shot by a blaster. It could be Luke getting his hand cut off by Darth Vader. Spoiler alert. And, it could be anything. But this game gives you a very powerful tool, because after a hero or a scoundrel gets a consequence, a hero or a scoundrel can always, always, always choose to resist that consequence. And this is very powerful because it puts a ton of agency into the player's hands. It's one of the reasons I like Forge in the Dark games so much. It's kind of complicated to explain, but let me try to use an example that we might be all more familiar with. We'll use we'll use D20. Okay. I have long sort of espoused the idea that I think some of the dice rolls in D20 are a little backwards. And one of the things that I always thought that would be more cool is if the players rolled the dice more. And especially when it comes to combat. And what I'm really saying is I think it would be much more fun for the player to roll an armor check or roll a defense check than for me, the GM, to roll a attack roll. Because I want the players to feel like that, that they're the ones making the check. But the key to this is if I were to ever implement that, and I have implemented it in the past, where I'm going to have the player roll their armor check instead of the monster or foe making an attack roll. What I always still do first, I still roll a die, even in GM diceless role-playing game D20. What die do I roll? If you're paying attention at home, you already know the answer to this. I roll the damage die first. What I like to do is I like to roll that, let's say the big ogre's coming in, and when I describe the ogre's attack, I describe the ogre's attack as if the ogre had connected with his big club. I roll my 2d6 plus 7 damage or whatever. And maybe I get a good number. I get a 6 and a 4. Wow, 17 damage. And I describe how menacing and scary. And I leave that 17 damage kind of just hanging there like a fucking weight over the player's head. And so when they reach over to grab their D20 to make their defense roll, everyone knows what the stakes are. The player is aware of whether this is a big deal or not. And so it creates the appropriate level of tension, because instead, they might, that's a big damage roll, they might want to, maybe they spend a hero point or something to re-roll that defense check because it was so important. On the other hand, if I roll a really low damage die, I can just simply describe it. It's still threatening and it's still out there, where I just say, the ogre closes in, his club is too ineffectual, so he just starts trying to whale you with his big meaty fists, and I get 8 damage or something, or 9 damage. And the player still, it's like, I'm going to make my defense roll, but they understand that what the consequence isn't as severe, and they can kind of role play and react appropriately. In Forged in the Dark, John Harper takes this idea and basically makes it exactly part of the play pattern, because when a player fails a roll, or I should say, if they fail the roll, failure, or if they succeed with a cost, the GM has the ability to introduce consequences because of that die roll. And the player can always resist them. And when a player resists them, they will either completely mitigate that consequence, making it not a factor, or they can at least greatly diminish it. But it is very cool to describe to the players as if it happened what that consequence is, and then have the player say, no, that's not what happens, because I'm really, really, really frickin' smart, or I'm really, really frickin' skilled. And Boba Fett doesn't track us down. You know why? Because I knew that he knew that I knew that he knew. Or I sensed his heat signature in the thing. And the Millennium Falcon that he's chasing is actually a sensor drone decoy. And we go off in the other direction. And because I'm Han Solo and I'm a badass. Now I know what you're saying, but that ruins the story. Yeah, it ruins the author's story. It ruins the GM's tightly scripted story, but it's not ruining the story that you and your friends are creating as you play Forged in the Dark games. So Long story short, resistance is really, really powerful in Forge in the Dark games, and I think it really, really empowers players. So, and again, I know there's not a lot, sometimes people don't know all the rules for Forge in the Dark games, but the way that a resistance works is each character has a resource on their character sheet called stress. And your character has 6 stress boxes. Let's see if we can pull that up. Okay. So we can see right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, you even get more than that. Shit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, wow, you got a ton. Okay, so you have 9 stress in Scum and Villainy. Maybe it's less in Blades in the Dark. I don't know, but maybe not. So this, it's don't call it hit points, but stress is sort of like the way of saying how much can I get away with as a player of this game of sort of fixing it for my agenda and my purpose. And so when you make a resist roll, what you're going to do is you're going to roll the dice, and that is going to determine how much stress it costs you. Note, you are not rolling to see if you succeed at resisting it. The resistance is automatic. It is 100%. It is guaranteed. The only thing that we are randomly determining is how many boxes of stress does that cost you. And the truth of the matter is, it is going to be, you're going to roll dice, okay? You're going to take the highest value of that dice, and you're going to take 6 minus the highest value as stress. So that means if I roll 2 dice and I get a 3 and a 5, we'll take the 5, and my character, 6 minus 5 equals 1 point of stress. For that particular moment, it would have cost my character 1 point of stress in order to resist that consequence. And we could talk a little bit about resisting consequences. One of the ways that you can sort of really set the tone of your game is how much characters can resist a consequence. If you allow your characters to basically like leap out of the way at the last minute and take no damage, or, you know, get away scot-free, basically you allow the resist to be like really effective, 100% efficacy. There's no strings left attached. The game will have a little bit more of a kind of a not superhero, but more of a heroic feeling. Whereas if the best that the heroes can only do with their resistance rolls is like make something shitty, like less shitty, but still shitty, that will change the tone of your game. Your game's going to feel a little more gritty, a little bit more run through. You know, this is a gritty game might be like, okay, the guy shoots you point blank with his flintlock pistol. You watch as your chest explodes and caves in as the musket shot ball blows through you, and you go, okay, I'm resisting that. And I go, okay, you turn at the last minute and it just grazes, you know, your arm and, you know, draws a thick line of blood. Or maybe I say, or it breaks your freaking humerus bone in half as it shatters into your arm. There's different ways that you can set the tone by how effective a stress is. Okay, but in this case, our characters were really cool because, you know, again, look at these dice rolls. 1, 2, or 3, that's a failure. That's going to generate consequences. A 4 or a 5, that's a success. That's going to generate a consequence, though. That means that like 86% of the dice rolls generate a consequence on one die. So it can feel sometimes in Blades in the Dark like you are always generating consequences and have nothing to do with them. And the answer is you can. People don't resist enough, but there's a reason. And this is a long way of getting to what I wanted to get to. Because remember, our awesome person here, our cool pilot with Boba Fett, rolled 2d6 to resist this. Now, how did we determine that Han Solo was going to roll 2d6 to determine how much stress he was going to spend? Well, it's simple. We mentioned before that there are 12 actions divided into 3 groups. Each of those groups is linked under an attribute: insight, prowess, and resolve. When you resist a consequence, the GM and the players will decide, based on how the player is narrating it and what makes sense in the fiction, which of these 3 attributes is used to roll to determine how much stress you take. And you might say, well, Derek, I can see where I have a doctor rating, and I can see where I have a helm rating and a skulk rating, but how do I know what my insight rating is, or what my prowess rating is, or what my resolve rating is? Simple. You see this vertical line that divides between the first point in a skill and the second and third points of the skill? To know what my insight value is, all I have to do is count up the number of filled in dots to the left of this line. So in this case, my character, if was called to make an insight roll, would be rolling 2d6. Whereas if my character was called upon to make a prowess roll, I would roll 1d6. And if my character was called upon to make a resolve roll, well, you can see where this gets pretty problematic. Now, there is no way to roll 0d6. And so what the game has you do is roll 2d6 and take the worst die. This is really, really bad. And there is, so getting back to mechanics and about how you can actually play this game correctly, or you can play this game poorly. In fact, again, remember too, the game wants to reward you for being, having a lot of cool abilities and not just being some car-opt super soldier. And so a mistake that I see a lot of people make when they make their characters is they will put a lot of points into just a small handful of abilities. And you only get so many points at the beginning of the game, or as you gain your first points of experience points, in order to advance these skills or these actions. And so, yes, people are so afraid of failure. They're like, no, I'm the engineer character. I'm the sneaky thief. I really want to, sneaky technician. I really want to be able to skulk, and I really want to be able to rig. And I'm going to put 3 points in all of those because I don't ever want to fail. But we talked about this. We said with just 2 dice, you already have a 75% chance of success. Going up to 3 only takes it up to 86. And furthermore, or 87. And furthermore, there are a lot of easy ways to get +1 die. Again, you can push yourself, a person can aid you, etc. What you have done, however, in this scenario is set yourself up to be completely hosed anytime your character is called upon to make a resolve roll. And to be honest with you, you're not even in that great of a position to make a prowess roll. So what I think more people should do when they are making a Forged in the Dark character is take a look at the actions that you're going to get, the points that you're going to get during character creation or during your first couple of sessions, and say, look, I've got 2 points in rig. I've got 1 point in study. I don't need another point in the insight category. I've already got 2 points there. What I should be looking to do, right, is picking up a point in scrap and a point in skulk and a point in consort and a point in sway. Spreading out your points means that my character, number one, has, because again, the difference between having no pips and 1 pip is huge. You go from rolling 2d6 choose worse to 1d6, and 1d6 alone by itself, naked, is a 50% chance of success. I mean, that's what a good character has in D20, right? Like if you're doing all the right things and you've got the right proficiencies and you've got the right weapon and the right item bonus and you have like a roughly 50% chance. So a character with 1 dot in skulk who gets some aid or takes a devil's bargain is up to 2 dice and already has a 75% chance of success. But what this character has done is by putting 2 points into prowess and 2 points into, 2 points into prowess actions that are different and 2 points into resolve actions that are different. Now, when this character suffers consequences and they want to choose to resist them, they are going to be rolling 2d6 for insight, 2d6 for prowess, and 2d6 for resolve. And this means that this character is going to be able to reliably resist consequences for a fairly cheap price. Like, this character is probably usually only going to pay anywhere between 1.5 points of stress anytime they resist. And there's a good chance that they might, only lose 1 or 0. So again, I think resisting is really, really important. And I've seen a lot of instances in this game where people, how can I say this? They bitch because they are playing the game and then they're like, oh, this stuff, bad stuff is happening to me. And it's like, okay, well, I'm going to resist it. And then they roll 2d6 take low. So they roll a 5 and a 2. And I go, okay, we'll take the 2. 6 minus 2 is 4. They take 4 points of stress out of their entire 9 point. They take half their stress bar just to resist one consequence. And then an hour or two into the session, or, maybe at the end of the thing, they're wondering why their character is full of stress. And they're wondering why. And then they get kind of frustrated because they go, oh, this game's supposed to be like you can resist things, but you can't because I'm full of stress and there's nothing I can do about it. And it's like, yeah, that is true. But also your character is built badly and you are resisting things that you shouldn't be resisting because you don't have any points in, prowess or resolve, and you built your character badly. And I don't know what to tell you. So there is a way to sort of play this game better than, and to set yourself up for cooler moments by giving yourself more tools to work with. Because again, the game isn't just namby-pamby, fluffy bullshit time. This is a very resource-driven, resource-heavy game. Your character is going to have these, you're going to have this stress resource. You're going to have your harm resource. You're going to have cred. You're going to have armor as a resource. You're going to have on a score or a mission, you're going to have your load, and you're going to have what equipment or load is available to your character. So this is a resource heavy game. In some instances more than most people are expecting out of a game like this. And so, if you manage your resources better, then you are going to be able to do more in the game. All right. I had a couple questions coming in here. So let me see if I can answer them here. Darth Gorlock, does Scum and Villainy give you any XP or anything if you roll something with 0 dice? Wicked One does that, which is really nice. Sort of wish Blades in the Dark did this as well, for risk as well as doing it for risky rolls. Well, Darth Gorlock, it does not do that for 0 dice. It does it for a desperate roll. So not risky, but desperate. Scum and Villainy does give you an extra little benefit, which is because Scum and Villainy, in my personal opinion, is a little bit more heroic. It's a little bit more, we like these characters, we want them to succeed, than Blades in the Dark, which is a little bit more grimdark. And this is actually an optional rule from the back of Blades in the Dark, but Scum and Villainy makes it sort of a standard rule in the game, which is a thing called gambits. And the way you can think about gambits is it is a pool of dice that the entire party shares. And you can add a gambit, which means you get to add a dice to that pool. You can add a gambit to your crew, which means add a dice to your crew's pool. Whenever you roll a 6 or a critical, which is a double 6, on a risky action, as long as you didn't spend a gambit die, on that particular roll. So again, gambits are a great way of, as long as your characters are taking risky actions, and you're going to occasionally get 6s and double 6s, you're going to be adding dice to this gambit pool, which is yet another way, especially in Scum and Villainy, that you can add a dice. Again, you can see here, there are 3 ways that you can add bonus dice. In fact, your character could have a rating of 0, and they take the devil's bargain. Now they're up to 1 die. Somebody in the party spends 1 point of stress and assists you. You're now up to 2 dice. And you spend a gambit from the party's communal pool. You, who have 0 dots in action, are now rolling 3 dice for this action. That's going from literally no skill to having a 87% chance of success. So it could be remarkably easy to succeed in this game. If there's a flaw to Forged in the Dark, it's that, it can be, once your characters routinely get a lot of 2s and 3s in their action ratings, they kind of succeed all the time, actually. So yeah, there's no benefit for that. Ben had a question. Does this game have as procedural an approach as other Forge in the Dark game? How is it similar or not similar to other Harper games? Will you cover what an actual session might look like? Yeah, we can definitely get into that. Long story short, Ben, yes. Scum and Villainy follows almost the same procedure as Blades in the Dark. I don't know if they have it here. Yep, they do. Okay. So your character will go on a score or a mission or, whatever you want to call it, a smuggling op. Again, it's kind of spacey. And then after the mission, your crew gets paid by the caught from, whatever the illicit deed was. You have to pay some upkeep on your ship. You can generate heat from, your mission that, might generate some the 5-0 on your tail in that particular system. Then you roll for any entanglements, aka future adventure creation, sort of living world elements, and then you go into the period of downtime. So from that perspective, Ben, it is very, very similar to Blades in the Dark, and it does have a very the part between, and I think we've talked about this before on the stream, but there's this classic gameplay loop of score. And I think like a score is moderately, like, it's pretty loosey-goosey. It's a little procedural because, the characters are going to be making action rolls and stuff like that, and you're trying to complete the mission. But there's a lot of room for just wiggle room in score. So I would say that a score is only partially procedural, not much. Then from a score, you go to that sort of payoff, heat, debt, and that is like super, super procedural. Then you go into downtime, which again has some structured rules around it, but does give the players a little bit more freedom, and there's a little bit more room for players to kind of come up with interesting ideas and sort of pursue their own goals. And yes, the game mechanicizes it, but again, I would say that this is fairly lightly procedural. It's still pretty, it's reasonably procedural. And then you go into the free play, and that is not procedural at all. And eventually, hopefully, as your characters are in free play, eventually someone's going to get an idea, or they're going to accept a job, and you're going to go back into that score phase again. And so this is the cycle of the Forged in the Dark game. I would really, in my personal opinion, this part right here is the only really ironclad procedural element of the thing. The score can be a little procedural, but again, it's the GM's just going to be reacting and creating consequences as the characters make action rolls. Downtime, I wouldn't say is procedural. I would say it is structured. It is definitely a game that does not want the characters to be like, hey, cool, we did that cool mission, and I made 10 billion credits, and I retire for all time, and I build the best ship, and I raise an army, and I become glad. It's like, no, it's like the downtime is designed to sort of get your characters on the road again. So unlike other skill-based games, this game rewards the generalist. I think so, Ben. I think to a certain extent, I think it absolutely does. I think that your character is better off, especially in the beginning of the game, sort of taking points in at least 2 or 3 skills in each of these 3 headings before you really start trying to get your third dot in something. If it is something that you do all the time, I think it's totally acceptable to have 2 dots in it. In fact, the characters start with 2 dots in the thing that they should be good at. The mechanic starts with 2 dots in rig, and the muscle starts with 2 dots in scrapping. But there could be a temptation there to be like, I want that 3rd dot in scrapping. And, I also want to be able to be athletic and scramble, and I want to be good at like athletics. So I'm going to put all my points into scrap and scramble. And you just end up with this character that is so one-dimensional. And in this game, that could really bite you in the ass, So I think that it's, so I think it is actually. I mean, again, because also too, remember, as I said before, there is diminishing returns on, the first dot is worth 50% success plus 50 success. The second dot is only worth plus 25%. The third dot is worth just 12.5%. So each dot is giving you less and less value as you go up. So again, there's a temptation there to just max everything out, but I don't think you should do that. Beowulf, good morning. Good morning to you as well. Well, for resistance, you want at least summon prowess and resolve if it plays like Blaze in the Dark. I mean, I think you should want it for all of them. But I will say this, Donnie, I personally feel like you should not have anything that's a 0. Your character should at least have one action dot in each of the 3 attributes at the beginning of the game. Like, that is just a minimum. I think that is just the bare minimum. Okay. Another thing to kind of talk about is, because again, a lot of times I hear people complaining about this, and they complain about the cost of or just like getting messed up in the game. So every character has access to armor. And for those of you who don't know, again, I'll briefly describe this. When your character goes on a mission or goes on a score, one of the few things that you actually have to pick before you go on a score is how loaded out is your character for this score. Are you lightly loaded, normally loaded, or heavy loaded? And this is mostly a narrative thing, but like if your characters are trying to sneak, I mean, when you think heavy loaded, think that the character has like, a spare rocket launcher on their back, and they've got a big, massive, overly packed, survival kit strapped to their back. They are clearly going in like ready for anything. If your characters are trying to, let's say, I don't know, sneak into the Imperial, a ball, so that they can speak with, the mistress of the Starways lanes, that's going to probably create a narrative problem. And your position and your effect might be greatly diminished because your characters are coming in with all of this gear hanging off of them. But normal is normal for a reason. And that is, most of the time, your characters aren't armed to the teeth, nor are your characters, just wearing, a light jacket with a couple of items discreetly hidden on their belt. It's normal. And that means in a normal mission, hey, you got a couple people re-upping their sponsorship as members of the adventure. Big shout out to John and Henry for John for 13 months of adventurer support, and Henry for a whopping 17, which I think means he must have signed up the first month that we had that available, because I think that's about the most I think that anybody could have. So thank you, gentlemen, for that continued support over the last year and a half, as it turns out. Okay, so going back to load, your character has all of this basically at will. And one of the things that you have at will is armor. Now, it takes 2 uses in order to get it. So in other words, if you have a normal load, which gives you 5 points of load, getting armor gives you 2 boxes. It costs 2 of your 5 load. But when you have armor available to you, if something happens to you, like you just got shot with a blaster rifle, or maybe a gravimetric pulse just went off, or a thermal detonator exploded nearby, and the GM is telling you you have to take a consequence, you have to take some harm, you can say, okay, actually, you know what? I'm going to mark 2 points of armor. My character had his plasteel reinforced combat fatigue on, ready for action, and I am going to mark my armor as instead of taking that harm, or instead of taking that consequence. And you could do that every single mission in the game, every single score in the game. And there are some books, some playbooks, like here we have the Muscle, who have the Bodyguard ability. The Battleborn ability. You can expend your special armor to reduce harm from an attack in combat. So the Muscle, if they take this Battleborn ability, they basically get access to a second box, which is now they have access to armor and they have access to special armor, which is kind of like a bonus action. This is kind of a wonky thing in the rules. Like you see special there as like this special armor and you're like, oh, so I have that. And it's like, no, you only have special armor if something gives you special armor. It is a little wonky. But long story short, every character at the very least, if they mark, hell, even if a character went into the ball, the lightest you can be is 3 load, which means your character always could be wearing armor. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if people are like afraid to spend their equipment load, even on a mission, but getting shot sucks. I recommend that if your character does take harm or something that a armor would resist or get rid of, just mark the armor and take one for the team and just mark the armor. Very, very, very easy. And by the way, again, getting into it does take up a lot of your load, but realize that, how much of this do you really need though, Beowulf, right? I mean, again, assuming in a normal situation that you're in 5 load, I'm not saying you, by the way, remember, you don't have to mark it at the beginning of the mission. You could go the whole mission and it turns out you didn't even wear armor that mission because you're just that damn good. But if you're about to get shot and it's bad, like don't take the consequence. Why spread the stress? If you have the load available, just do it. Another thing to be aware of is teamwork. There are 4 teamwork actions in the game. This is true in Blaze in the Dark and in Forge in the Dark. One of them is leading a group action, which is one of my favorite things to do in the game, by the way. Another one is protect a teammate. And guess what? The rules on this are exceptionally forgiving, I would say, to the players. In that when you step in to face a consequence that one of your teammates would otherwise face, you suffer it instead of them. You may roll to resist as normal. There's no check for this. There's no, you don't have to spend stress. If I am on a mission if I'm the muscle and I'm on the mission with my, sort of force sensitive, kind of priest-like friend, and they get shot, if narratively I am in a situation to step in and suffer the consequence for one of my teammates, then I get to do that instead. And I get to roll to resist as normal, which means I can mark my armor. I can roll my resistance if I'm in a better situation to do this. And they even say here, this is how you do the I will dive in front of the bullet move, right? And again, it's simple, it's automatic. And again, it lends now how and where and why can you do this? It all depends on the fiction. It all depends on the narrative. So if you are in this weird situation where your mechanic character already used his armor, he got shot unexpectedly. So you mark that he had his armor on and you cross off the armor and you go, yeah, okay, the armor took the blow. And then he takes another shot to the chest. Maybe this is where your buddy who's a muscle, who hasn't used his armor yet, who is narratively right nearby to you, pushes you out of the way behind a crate or behind a bunch of barrels, depending on what system you're playing, and kind of grits as the blaster strikes him in his thermoplate armor, because he takes it and then he marks his armor. So nobody is taking any damage here. And it's like, as long as you can avoid taking any harm and keeping your stress from filling up so that you don't take a trauma, your characters are going to be in a much better situation to use your downtime to do all sorts of cool shenanigan scoundrel shit, which is what makes the game really fun. Let's see here. Darth says, I do wish they had chosen a better name for load, though. Me and my friends aren't mature enough for it. Darth Gorlock, You're absolutely right. When I played Dungeon Time Extreme, which was our 5e hack, a big part of the 5e hack was using the 5 torches deep system. And they have in that system a stat or a derived stat called load. It's for your like strength, like how much load can you carry? It depends on your strength score. And you know what? Me and my friends are in our 40s, and turns out we weren't mature enough to handle it either. So, I feel like protect usually gets sidelined, except for if you have another ability that procs off protecting. Not that it isn't strong, it just sort of gets forgotten. Agreed. And remember too, protect. Again, we're used to thinking like in D20 version. You step in to face the consequences that a teammate would face. Realize that that doesn't have to be a blaster pistol. We are so used to thinking about this in the sense of like, what's the word I'm looking for? We're so used to thinking of this in the sense of D&D, where it's just hit points and meat, and you know we're grinding through each other's hit points. For example, let's say that our mechanic. Okay. Let's say that. Okay. Well, Microsoft Whiteboard crashed. That's cool. Sweet. Okay. Well, my whiteboard has completely crashed and is not going to come back up. All right. Well, all right. So let's imagine that our mechanic character, okay, is trying their best to fit in at a real fancy ball, okay? And I roll like shit. And the GM describe, and let's say that my character, maybe I didn't do a really great job, and maybe my character's resolve is 0 dice, or maybe my character only has 1 point in resolve. He has it in command, but he is not much of a consorter or a swayer or a tuner. And so you wouldn't say that they are particularly good at, you know, diplomatic and being, you know, very, very persuasive. So we're in this ball. My character makes a roll. I've rolled badly. And as a consequence, the game master says, you know, everybody at the table that you were trying to impress is laughing at you. You are going to mark harm. Okay. Which is going to be publicly embarrassed, and it's going to be really severe, and it's going to make it really hard for you to, you know, continue to function in this situation. So a consequence just happened. I actually dealt harm. It was social harm. And the character, again, if I had my whiteboard wasn't crashed, you know, I might write down level 3 harm, publicly embarrassed, right? It's like, you know, it's like, or it's a scandal, you know, it's just like absolutely complete, total humiliation, right? That's the harm. But protect can trigger off of anybody having a consequence. So let's say that your character is the speaker, the suave, real smooth talker. And you, well, look, hell, at the beginning of the game, you have 2 dots in resolve. Well, maybe your character has taken sway as well. So your character has 3 dots in resolve. That means you roll 3 dice when you resist a consequence with resolve. So what do? Well, your character is near the mechanic. You use the teamwork action, okay, for free to protect a teammate. And you take that consequence yourself. And then when you resist it, you are resisting it with your bomb-ass resolve of 3 or 4 dice. And you end up in a situation where it basically costs you close to no stress because you roll a 5 or a 6. And I think in the narrative, I think we can all agree what this would look like. You know, the kind of maybe rough around the edges mechanic is saying something, and then some, you know, mean-spirited bitch or some, you know, total douchebag starts like ripping into them, calling them a backwards, you know, country bumpkin, and everyone else is kind of getting into it. And then your buddy, your friend, she slides in and she makes this like coolly this like really cool backhanded compliment, of the guy, and just takes him down a complete peg and just immediately sort of makes everybody feel like a complete jerk for ever supporting this guy. That is what just happened there. The speaker came in and protected their mechanic friend from a social consequence and then resisted the social consequence themselves instead of their ally who had a bad roll. What do I need to roll to get the whiteboard back? I think that's going to be a downtime action. So after the stream, actually, this all makes sense. So, okay, the stream is like my score, right? I'm doing it. I'm being active. I'm being, I'm focused. I'm in the zone. Then after the stream ends, there's the payoff. How much tips and, how much super chats did I get? Okay, cool. Awesome. Then there's the upkeep and maintenance, right? The money I make from this has to go to pay for my studio rent. And if I'm running an actual play, I have to pay out my players for being there. Then I get heat. All right. Did I say anything inflammatory? Did I say a super hot take? Did I say something critical, God forbid, about somebody's favorite game system? And now I'm going to get a bunch of comments, or someone's going to light me up on Twitter or Reddit. Then those happen. Then there's entanglements, which is, okay, people who watch the stream, like, what happens? Does someone join the Patreon? Does someone subscribe? Does someone want to do a collab with me? Maybe somebody approaches me about a sponsorship deal. And then we get to downtime. And before the next stream, I have 2 downtime actions that I can use to improve the stream's quality, fix shit that broke, or maybe try to indulge a vice to lower my stress to keep me in the game longer. And then eventually it's stream time again, and the play pattern comes right back around, and I'm back streaming. And that's it. That's the play pattern of streamers in the dark, which is a very different program than the one that we are currently doing. And so, yeah, I mean, that's, that is the thing. This is like a bad feeling in Broken Compass. Yeah, in a certain way. I agree. I mean, I'm not as 100% familiar with that mechanic as you are, Ben, because I really only read through the book the one time, but I think it is very similar. But yeah, so one of the things about Forge in the Dark mechanics is I think people, and I know Ben says this a lot in the Discord, people don't call a game that is that thick rules light. It's not a rules light game. I'm not trying to say that it is the most complicated game of all time. I'm not trying to say that it has, 10,000 pages of rules. It's not, Traveler or Pathfinder 2nd edition. But to call this is not Honey Heist. Okay, this is not lasers and feelings. This is a fully developed, flushed out game. And just like any game with a capital G, there is a certain skill or proficiency in playing the game. And I think more people, and again, a lot of people, their only experience with Forged in the Dark games is a one shot or maybe a really quick campaign. And I just don't feel like they ever get the chance, to really appreciate what the game, could have to offer. I suppose it would be like if you were playing, it's like what we were talking about the Call of Cthulhu stream. And there's that rule about, don't let people have skills higher than 60% or 70% or something like that. And Ben was saying he always follows that rule. This would be like if you played Call of Cthulhu and a bunch of people all took 99% in firearms, 99% in dodge. They all had a bunch of shotguns and rifles, and like everybody in your party's investigator was built that way. And then you go into the adventure and you're just like taking out cultists left and right. Hey, Ben, tip from Ben. What up? Oh, I thought I turned the, I thought I had the text to speech on. I guess I did not. Sorry. I thought I turned that back on. Ben, with a $25 tip, says, I think I am the yin to Darth's yang, lol. I find it fascinating seeing the chicken and egg Ouroboros effect of Harper's games affecting other designers and then circling back again into his own designs. Yeah, I think that is an interesting kind of take there. But like John Harper is, I think someone who is in danger, Ben, you might say, of becoming like too self-referential, right? Like he's being inspired by games that were inspired by his games. And it kind of maybe tends to like double down on his overindulgences. Like we've talked about this, but like I personally feel like Aegon is hyper procedural to the point of being like a little, even for me, being a bit too much. And I wonder if like there's an element there where Harper is sort of just caught in a feedback loop of his own design philosophy. And everyone just tells him he's a genius. Because to be clear, he is. But like, who's going to push back on John Harper at this point in the industry? Nobody. So, I think that's an interesting perspective. But thank you, Ben, for that tip. I am curious, your yin to Darth Yang. Are you implying that Darth wants to add Blades in the Dark mechanics to everything, and you don't want to add anything to anything? Ben says no. I don't know what he's saying no to. Everything I just said. I think he's saying that I feel Blades in the Dark and Scum and Villainy have a similar gameplay loop to Mouse Guard. Yeah. All right. Mouse Guard has kind of a play pattern in that it's player's turn, game master's turn, player's turn, game master's turn. This is different, I think, Dan, because Blades in the Dark, there really is no game master turn in the same kind of official sense. Like Mouse Guard's very formal about this, that like the players get to do something cool and then the game master gets to like take the reins, and, a fierce storm rolls in and, can really make the mice's life challenging. In Scum and Villainy or in Blades in the Dark, the game master is only empowered. This is similar. This is the PBTA DNA coming forward. The game master is really only empowered to, create consequences, either as sort of essentially golden opportunities, but really as a result of the player's actions. So we also have Candela, which is a Blades in the Dark light that changed up a lot of stuff. And yes, I don't think Strauss was like the lead designer, but he was definitely on the creative team that built that game system. So I completely agree. So yeah, I think it's possible again to make characters that are bad. I've said this before. I think Scum and Villainy might do it. For harm. Let me see here. Harm. Here we go. I think it's Band of Blades. Oh, here we go. Yeah. Non-physical harm. Harm doesn't have to be, physical. And I think this is kind of missing from Blades in the Dark, and Band of Blades takes it a step further and formally defines either temporary harm or persistent harm. And I'm a big fan of that. Harm is removed through the recover downtime action, but can also fictionally vanish. And I think this is really important. I think GMs have to remember, you should absolutely use temporary harm. So for example, if a flash grenade goes off near a character, I think it is totally acceptable to give them level 3 harm, completely dazed or totally stunned, because level 3 harm is really, really, really tough. If you have level 3 harm marked to do anything in the game, you have to spend stress. So it is a really, really, really nasty consequence. But in the way that the game is set up, recovering from harm is a real buzzkill. It takes a long time. And more importantly, it eats up downtime actions. And downtime actions, in my experience playing this game with several different groups, both Scum and Villainy and Blades in the Dark, that is what they looked forward to the most. I had players who were always interested in gaining new contacts, learning about other factions, creating their own project clocks. Every game I've ever played, all of my players had all sorts of different schemes and plans and schemes within schemes. And all of that kind of came to the forefront during downtime. But if your characters are basically forced to spend all their downtime recovering, it could be a little bit of a buzzkill. And so what I really have gotten into the habit of using is using temporary harm instead of permanent harm, which is harm that isn't going to last. It might not even last throughout the entire score, but it'll definitely go away by the end of the score, or at least become a much, much less severe harm, which again, I think is really, really important. Another thing to talk about, cred and stash. You can spend everyone goes, it sucks. You only get 2 downtime actions. That's true. You do. But you can spend cred to take additional downtime actions. I have found, for whatever reason, maybe it's just too realistic, but I have found that most of the time when I play with players in both Blades in the Dark and Scum and Villainy, they were very reluctant to spend their cred. And again, to reiterate this, if your character has more than 4 cred at the end of a mission, you can't carry around that much cash on you. And it ends up going into this thing called your stash, which is a little bit like a 401k. It's sort of like your character's retirement plan. And you can withdraw cred from your stash, but it's at a 2-to-1 disadvantage. So it's not great. But at the same time, when your character either retires because they've received 4 traumas, or if the campaign ends, the number of boxes marked in your character's stash is basically how well did you feather your nest, right? How big is your nest egg? And for whatever reason, characters were obsessed with just never spending their cred. When in fact, spending cred is not only a great way to, get your character more actions or get your character additional benefits, but it also really plays into the sort of scoundrelly, down on their luck scoundrel that these games are really trying to emulate. Look at Firefly, okay? Look at the crew of the Serenity. Hey! It's our buddy GM Scott.
GM Scott tipped $50.
That one worked.
I hate that I can't participate in tonight's video. I'll have to watch the VOD. But this is the game system I really wanted more information about.
Well, I am excited that you're here. Thank you so much for that generous tip, GM Scott. And of course, I know that this is again eventually where you want to get your group going. I will say that this is easily my favorite sci-fi game to run. And I can't necessarily, Traveler might eventually take that spot if it is as cool as I hope it is. But in terms of like a narrative gamist game, I really, really like Scum and Villainy. And, I think a lot of people who are sort of inspired by traditional sci-fi tropes will always find a sort of source here. And there's a lot of people who I find bounce off of Blades in the Dark because it's so weird. It's this weird death stay, fantasy. GM Scott, thank you so much. But Blades in the Dark is weird. You're in this weird death city where the gates of dead have been broken and there's weird soul energy. In this game, you're the crew of the Firefly, okay? You're the Guardians of the Galaxy, okay? You're the Rebel Alliance, right? It's just these classic sci-fi tropes. Everybody knows Firefly. Everybody knows Guardians of the Galaxy or Cowboy Bebop. Everybody knows Star Wars. Or some sci-fi where, a ragtag group of rebels are fighting the fight against the evil, imperial hegemony, So it's one of those situations where I feel like a lot of people bounce off of Blades in the Dark because it's weird as shit. I'm not even going to lie. It's weird as shit. It's inspired by some really strange some people really like it, but it is a weird setting. I'm not going to lie to you. But Star Dancer, Cerberus, and Fire Drake are much, much, much easier buy-ins for a lot of people. I'll also add in that, let me see if I have a map. I will also add in that a lot of people appreciate, I'm trying to find a map. I think I have a map here. Oh, a map of the Procyon system. Image. So this is the default setting of the game. Of course, you are more than able to create whatever kind of game system you want to create. But here we go. Perfect. There we go. So this is the map of the default setting for Scum and Villainy. And you can see that this is an entire sector. They don't care. Ships don't have faster than light drives. They have jump drives. They require the use of jump gates. And you can see that there are a couple of jump gates between these systems. So this is a jump gate here, that goes from Rin to Holt, from Iota to Breck. And then there's a jump gate in Rin that is heading back towards, in the core worlds, right? The Imperial space. So this is sort of like a backwater sector in space. But you can see that there's 4 star systems. There's probably about 24 planets and who knows how many moons, hundreds probably of moons. It doesn't have that pressure cooker feel that Blades in the Dark have. In Blades in the Dark, you cannot get out of the city. Outside the city is wasteland death. Just Mad Max to the nth degree, except undead too. And it's just, you're trapped in the city, and the city is horrible, and there's nothing beautiful at all. But, Procyon sector has world, there's utopia worlds, and there's, it's a little rough and tumble because it's on the outer edge of the galactic rim, but it doesn't have that same intensity. Now, the idea is, of course, that, traveling back towards Imperial space could be potentially problematic for your character. And so you are kind of forced to kind of deal with the political realities of living in this one, sector. But it's a very different feel than a game like Blades in the Dark. And so not only is it the sci-fi element that feels a bit more freeing, it's also the fact that the default setting, it just feels a little bit more freeing. And furthermore, I find that people really just like having a ship. I don't know what it is about games, but in Blades in the Dark, you pick a crew type, right? Your assassins, your thugs, your bravos, your smugglers, your thieves. In Scum and Villainy, you pick a ship, and that not only is your ship, but it also tells you the kind of campaign that you are going to be running. And I just find that people love investing in this ship up. I mean, my group, when we played Scum and Villainy, everything they did was, they named their ship the Starjammer. The Spelljammer. No, maybe it was the Starjammer, whatever. Either Spelljammer or Starjammer. And, they loved it. They had long-term projects to soup up the engine, and the mechanic was always trying to, find them odd jobs so that they could get enough cred so that they could, afford a new pair of plasma coils so that they could, kit out their ship even more. And they loved it. I mean, it was completely self-driven, and, it was awesome. And they really got into the ship aspect of it, which I think is another big win for Scum and Villainy for sure. Also, mechanically, there's a lot of things in this game that just everybody, there's a character called the Mystic. Okay. And one of the abilities in this game is everybody has a skill called attune. And attune is in Blades in the Dark, you're attuning to the ghost field, which is this weird energy field that exists beyond the veil of the living. It's kind of confusing and nobody knows what it is. In Scum and Villainy, you are attuning to the way. And what is the way? It's the Force. It's literally the Force. They just don't call it the Force because of copyright infringement. It is the Force. And there is a character called the Mystic, and they have the ability to create, they have visions, and they can propel things telekinetically using the power of the way. And they can create a psi blade by creating a glowing light beam psionic sword. Okay. The Mystic is literally a Jedi. And when people see this and they go, oh, I know Star Wars, I like Star Wars, they are able to bring in their favorite fun moments into the game, and they just immediately know how to play the game. With Blades in the Dark, people are like, I don't even know what I am supposed to be. Everybody knows what a Jedi is. For the character of the Muscle, if you read this, if you're familiar with the show Firefly, you read these abilities and you read the names of some of these class abilities and items. They are literally taken from movies. They are literally taken from, shows that we love. There's abilities like I am a leaf on the wind, a classic line from, technically from Serenity. There's like, never tell me the odds, right? Like there are these fantastic abilities that are just speak right to, the ability. Yeah. And by the way, which playbook gets never tell me the odds? You guessed it. The Scoundrel, right? Look at another ability that the Scoundrel gets. They get shoot first, right? This is a game made by people who, they know what movies and they know what TV shows that you are, trying to emulate. And I appreciate that they are very forthright with that. Let's see here. Ben, I have not played Dune yet, so I have read the game. I have read part of the one campaign setting, Agents of Dune. I have not really broken into my Great Houses book that I picked up at Gen Con, but I have not actually played Dune 2D20 yet. So that is correct, right? Damn, my players always spend all their coin immediately on downtime actions, but they don't care about the retirement of their characters at all. Horses for courses, I guess, Darth. Yeah, no, my group of players in multiple Blades in the Dark campaigns and multiple, I've only run one Scum and Villainy campaign, but multiple Blades in the Dark campaigns and one Scum and Villainy campaign have never really spent their coin or their cred, which is fantastic. Let's see. I love Blades in the Dark, but I'm not a big fan of the setting. I'd prefer a much less dark setting. I agree. And again, I mean, I think there are more opportunities to make hacks for the game. Some people feel like Blades in the Dark is just like completely baked into the setting, and I don't actually agree with that. I think it is really baked into the premise, which is that your characters are sort of oddballs on the outskirts of society, because even in Scum and Villainy, your characters could be the crew of kind of a would-be frigate, performing odd jobs of questionable legality, but that doesn't necessarily make you evil. You're not assassins or drug dealers, but your characters are definitely a little bit outside of normal, outside of the law. If your characters are members of the Rebel Alliance, we're obviously used to looking at them as being these tremendous heroes, but from a certain point of view, they're the villains, right? They're the ones on the outskirts of society. They're the ones that are disrupting. They're the ones that are taking what I'm sure is being told in the propaganda as terrorist actions. So again, your characters may be heroic, but they're also still on the outskirts. And I think Scum and Villainy does a better job of allowing some shades of gray there instead of just being like, you are evil, murder people in Death World City, and you'll kill anybody that gets in your way. So, but yeah, one of the things I want to talk about is in terms of mechanics, and actually one of the reasons I'm just very sad that my whiteboard died. Let me see if I can open her up again. Nope, it is just completely gone. I have no idea what is going on. looks like I got kicked out of my Microsoft account or something. All right. Well, I logged in under a different account, so maybe this will work. Okay. So one of the things that I really like about Forged in the Dark games is I love the way that the group check works. I don't know why this is just like a personal pain in my butt, but I hate the way that most games handle group checks, or more importantly, don't handle them. It really bothers me. And because as a GM, I love calling for group checks. I think it is like the quickest and easiest way to deal with a lot of problems that come up all the time in the game. And I'm just not ever happy with the sort of standard procedure, which is kind of like, you know, you pick the person with the highest skill or stat or whatever like that. Then a bunch of other people all spam die rolls to aid them. And it's like, maybe it's giving this trivial bonus, and then you're adding it to the D20 and you fail anyways. And it's like, but what if this person's really, really freaking good? What if they're as good as you are? And even then it takes a lot of time and processing. And I just don't like it. And then of course, the other thing I don't like is in most of these games, you know, helping somebody out costs, it doesn't cost anything, right? It's free. So you go, yeah, I'll aid him. Why not? Why wouldn't I aid? Right? It's, you know, it's totally, I will give you an example. A game that I really, really like, Fabula Ultima. The way it handles group checks is you pick someone, the leader, who's going to make the check. And then, you know, they say, okay, I'm going to roll insight plus willpower. And then everybody else who wants to aid them, which would basically be everybody in the party, also makes an insight plus willpower check against DC 11. And if they succeed, this person gets a +1 bonus. So this person succeeds, they get a +1. This person fails the check, so they give a +0. And so then, okay, this person's getting a +2 bonus, and then they roll their check and add 2. It is, not only is it like long and fiddly, and then you have to wait, everybody has to do all these checks, and then we roll. And what if I just roll shitty? And then it's like, we did all that time in the game for nothing. But more importantly, it doesn't cost these people anything to aid. So they're just going to go, yeah, I aid. I'm terrible at this, but I'll aid. I don't care. I love, and by the way, one of my biggest, and we'll talk about this on Tuesday, one of my biggest gripes about Powered by the Apocalypse is, in my personal opinion, it does group checks very badly. Root and Avatar have a little bit of an advantage because they have this exhaustion track that you can use as a resource. But man, it is Powered by the Apocalypse is really bad at group checks. So what I like about the Blades in the Dark, or I should say the Forged in the Dark group check, is if you have a group, let's say, you know, PCA, PCB, PCC, PCD, and let's say they're all trying to sneak in to a heavily guarded fortress. So the whole group is trying to sneak in. And, you know, Pathfinder would have you roll everybody's stats, and then, oh, if you've got quiet allies, you get to roll with the person with the worst stat. And you're like, I get it. I get why it's statistically an advantage, but it still feels terrible. So let's say that person A is really good at sneaking. They have 3 dice. Person B is pretty bad. Person C is okay. And person D is horrendous. They are actively bad at this. Okay. And this just creates a problem where you're like, this person is never going to be able to sneak in. And it's just very annoying. And everybody has to roll these checks independently, and you have to figure out what happens if some people pass and some people don't pass. What I love about the group action is the leading action is when you do a group check in Forged in the Dark, what you do is you pick the person who is going to lead the check. Now, Darth Gorlock and I have gotten into debates or fights before because Darth Gorlock feels like it should be forced to be the person who has the best stat. But I don't even know that necessarily makes sense. Is the best leader for a programming team the person who can code the best? No, not necessarily. If a group is trying to sneak into an Imperial base, maybe the character who is an ex-Imperial stormtrooper is the person who leads. And narratively, you describe it as, they know the lay of the land. They know what the patrol routes are like. They know what maybe they know what some of the codes are. So they're the ones that are kind of taking point on this particular infiltration. The leader decision isn't just a mechanical one. It's also a narrative one. But the best and most important part about this is when they initiate a group action, every person is going to roll their results independently, just as if they were making the normal action. Let's say our person A gets a 2, a 4, and a 5. Our person B gets a 4. Person C gets a 2 and a 6. And person D rolls 2 dice, a 2 and a 5, and takes the worst. Okay? So that means that A generated a 5, B generated a 4, C generates a 6, and D generates a 2. It's real simple. As a group, you take whatever result you got that is highest. And you might say, okay, so there's no cost to sneaking in with this person who's terrible at sneaking? No. Because whoever was the leader for our action, in this case it was PCB, they take 1 point of stress for each person in the group whose result was a 1, a 2, or a 3. In other words, a failure. So because D sucks at sneaking really badly, the leader of this action takes a point of stress. If, say, player C had rolled really badly and rolled a 1 and a 2, well, they get to take the highest of 1 and 2, but that's still just a 2. Well, now player B or PCB would take 2 points of stress. And now the best result for the entire group would be the 5 that we got from A. Long story short is, number one, this is really quick. Number two, it feels like it's not automatic. It's not just, hey, we're all going to add up. Yeah, we all aid. Yep, we all aid. Yep, we all aid. Because it could potentially cost you stress. And when it does cost you stress, it's because somebody rolled badly. And it feels like it makes sense. Like if this was a movie, it's a stressful moment, when you're like, oh, are they going to get caught? Because, PCD was sneaking in and, they bumped into something or they rattled a supply depot or they got stuck in the fence. And it's that dramatic moment and the leader has to infiltrate and the leader has to improvise. But the best part about this is every player gets to feel like they are participating because each of their checks is an individual check. It's still an action roll. You can still take a devil's bargain. You can still push it. You can still do all of those things. And so each player really does feel, it's not just like in D&20 where, the rest of the players aren't really doing the check, right? They're rolling to see if they give a +1. Any one of the players could be the ones who roll the best result. And that makes you feel, I'm telling you, it makes you feel at the table like you're more engaged and more involved. And as a result of this, I have done, in numerous occasions, I have done entire combats as just a single group check. And it was narrative. It was awesome. Everybody got to describe the results of their die roll. And we just and we're all just basing it off of, oh, I rolled a 2-5 and I rolled a 1-2. And then we get the final result and then we apply the consequences and we say, oh, this all makes sense. And it feels like you have this, it really does feel like you have this multi-round combat. It's really crazy. And it's one group check, sometimes two. And that's all you need. And I'm telling you, in my experience, if you do it right and you're using the game the way it's meant to be played, it will feel like you just did an 30-minute, 45-minute elaborate content, except instead of combat, but instead of being played out at a snail's pace on your grid, it'll happen within 5 minutes, but it's going to happen up here. It's going to happen in your head. It's going to happen in your theater of the mind. And as a result, my experience has been people tend to connect with it better. They tend to respond better to that kind of experience. And I just think that one of my favorite reasons, we covered them tonight, by the way, the two things the reason why I like Forged in the Dark better than Powered by the Apocalypse, PBTA. Number one is because of the group check mechanic that is present in Forged in the Dark. And number two, resist rolls. I cannot stress to you how empowering having the ability to resist is, because there's always that dread moment. And I see people complain about it all the time where, they go, oh, like at least in D20, if I miss, I just miss. Nothing happened. That's better than something bad happening. And I don't necessarily know that I agree with that, because I want there to be exciting things happening. I want there to be consequences. I want there to be explosions. But there comes a time and a place when a player says, no, this is important to me and I want to be able to succeed, and I am willing to pay the price to avoid this consequence. And I have this stress and I'm going to spend it. And this is something that I care about. And that is so empowering as a player, because now you don't have to worry about whether your character is going to look stupid or silly or fail in a moment where you say, no, this is something that my character would resist and would not let this bad thing that is about to happen come to take place. That is very empowering. And I think that's really, really important. In fact, Fabula Ultima kind of has a variation of this. It's a side roll. There's this really to the point. By the way, in Fabula Ultima, you roll 2 dice. If you get a double 1, which is very unlikely. I mean, you're rolling like D8 and a D10. So your odds of getting double 1 are 1 in 80. Pretty minuscule chance, right? Under 2%, under 3%. So very small. That is called a fumble. And if that happens, you fail, it's bad, and there's nothing you can do about it. But there is a sort of optional rule in Fabula Ultima, which is if you have any other failure, which is you roll the 2 dice and you don't get high enough to beat the TN or beat the test number or beat the DC, there is an optional rule that says you can turn failure into success with a cost. And the GM will tell you what that cost is. And the cost could be very high. And you could always choose not to pay it and then accept your failure. But in Fabula Ultima, it is 100% if you use this house rule, where any character at any time can convert a failure into a success as long as the GM is able to give them a cost, and the player is willing to pay that cost. Lollipop correcting me. It is. I was saying TN, which is from Legend of the Five Rings. DC, which of course is from D20. It is called DL, or difficulty level, in Fabula Ultima. Thank you, Lollipop. This is so powerful. Even I'm kind of like, I'm a little scared of the narrative power and agency that this house rule would allow. But my games would probably be better if I used this rule in Fabula Ultima, which is also why I am very generous with my resistance rolls. If a player wants to resist a consequence, most of the time I tend to either completely eliminate the consequence or greatly reduce it. But that is because I am trying to go for a slightly more heroic, slightly more pulpy feel to my games than maybe some people are. We got a bunch of people here. I was writing here. Mike T says, the good old KLC YT. By the way, welcome back, Mike T. I haven't seen you in a while, buddy. One of the true pleasures of my life, Mike, was reading your legal defense essay and watching Mike come to the defense of the Jagged Pine Pact during the infamous trial of Northern Reaches. But yes, it is a wretched hive of scum and villainy. Star Wars, the story of a young man radicalized by an ancient religion into carrying out an act of terrorism against a legitimate government that resulted in the loss of hundreds of thousands of lives. That's right. How many independent contractors were on that second Death Star? I want to know. And yes, when I did mention that certain point of view, it was deliberate. It is more fiddly, but Versus D does have a great aid mechanic. I do not remember the aid mechanic from Versus D. I remember talking about it because aiding and group checks are so important to me. Because it's just a natural instinct. You know, your buddy's going, I mean, don't get me started on 5e. 5e has the worst fucking aid rule. Hey, I help him. Okay, he'll have advantage. That's it. That's all it takes. I help him. He has advantage. Okay, that's it. There's no cost. You don't even the game. You don't even have to be necessarily skilled or better at the thing that the other person is. But even if you do require them to be proficient, which the game rules don't say you have to do, it's like so ridiculous. And like once a character has advantage, they might as well just automatically succeed. There's no price to it. So why wouldn't you just help them every single time? Let's see. Got it then, because everyone aiding still needs to be decent in skill or it starts to add complications. And this is kind of a less fiddly way of doing it, as you said, Ben, because in this case, we just say, take stress because this person sucks. But it is kind of different. I was saying about how Darth and I disagreed about the leader aspect. He said, I did turn around on that. I see the point about not highest in the stat doing all the group checks. Sort of playing the game more by interacting with the mechanics. Agreed, because ideally you want, I mean, in a perfectly metagame world, you would want your character who had the absolute worst stat or action to actually be the leader, because they are going to be the least likely than it's going to be the greatest chance for you not to generate any stress. But I would say that between the optimal metagame, you should play to the narrative, right? With a mind towards getting to an optimal gamist decision. Let's see here. Isaiah does like the Blaze in the Dark mechanic. It gives natural consequences without the consequences needing to be a failure. I agree. Yes, my printed circuit board PCB was coming in here. When I said faster, you didn't mean how long it takes to roll the dice and then seeing if the group check succeeded. Well, Lollipop, I mean, to be clear, everyone rolls the dice and at the same time, and you just see who has the highest result. And then you immediately know what the result of the group check is. So it's pretty dang quick, because there's no secondary rolls. There's not like a set of pre-rolls that are determining what the value bonus is going to be of the final roll. It's just everybody rolls, you look down and you're like, oh, he got a 6. So we got a 6. I'm saying though, that frees up a lot of time for us to sort of almost take like a Genesis system, Legend of the Five Rings system approach, where we can kind of narrate what our dice rolls meant. And I think it's really fun. Beowulf's, why didn't the crew just resist the ship damage? If they would be okay with the pilot dying, then why not the pilot taking a little stress instead? Sorry for the throwback. It's a fantastic question, Beowulf. And they should have. But again, this is a group that was fairly inexperienced with the system. I think they had a natural fear of acquiring stress. Some of that was my fault because of a rule that I had gotten wrong, which ended up with them taking more stress than they should have. But either way, they had this mentality, right, of like, in their mind, resisting was a bad thing instead of an empowering thing. And it's just because I hadn't fully explained the ability for resisting to be an extremely empowering ability. But Darth says, the presence of resistance does not mean that you can lob any consequence at your PCs, but I don't want to open up that can of worms. I mean, again, that all comes down to your tone. Because again, Scum and Villainy is very, very, very open about this. And whoa, first super chat, big ol' super chat from John. What up, buddy? Hello. Well, welcome to the channel. There's Kefka. All right. Well, thank you for that. Never mind. It's a new account. It's, of course.
I am strong, strong, strong.
Of course, it is Great Role Playing Debbie, the Zebra Wrangler himself. All right. John says, aka Great Role Playing Debbie, aka Phoenix, aka Zebra Wrangler. I'm working on an open source project that I'd love Knights Last Call's opinion on. It's skill trees, hex maps, where each hex is a goal. Each higher layer is more advanced goals. And I'm working on a TTRPG one with different games to try out for people. And I'd love some suggestions. Dude, yeah. Random off topic, high tips. Of course it was me. Yes. John, yeah, I would absolutely love. I mean, we have talked about other people's games in the Discord before. We have provided insight. Some people have even play tested other people's home sort of hacks and versions of games as people try to, in some cases, get things set up. So I'm happy to take a look at it personally myself for you, just because, you're such a awesome member of the group of the Patreon. But I think all of us would be totally awesome. And in fact, I would argue the collective mind of the KOLC Patreon is much, much smarter than me, and certainly more capable of discerning critiques and criticism. And so, yeah, I think it's awesome. I know that, there are definitely a subset of people on our server who would be giddy at the idea of skill tree maps and hex maps that you're trying to advance up on your skill tree progress. It feels very like the junction, like the sphere grid or the junction grid system from like Final Fantasy 12 or maybe Final Fantasy 13. I'm not sure what they used in 15, but we get people talking about that all the time. So I'm sure there is a group of people who would really, really love that. Well, anyway, thank you for that incredibly generous, and incredibly amazing super chat. Very, very appreciate it. And yeah, we'd love to take a look, and I'm sure we could get some people to talk about it. Okay, you check the whole thing with examples in the open RPG discussion of Discord. Perfect place for it. And again, if it gets to the point where there's some like legitimate play testing that people might end up doing, or at least spinning off of it, we'll probably end up putting it in a forum someplace so that we can kind of keep it organized and keep some of the notes, gathered in one place. That way, you don't have to scroll through an open forum or open channel to find information about what's going on with your game. Cool. Well, yeah. So, any last, again, I know we just kind of mostly talked about Forged in the Dark mechanics and how people basically need to learn how to play, on the game, and I know it sounds stupid, but I think you will have a better narrative experience with this game if you learn how to play it better. And I think that a lot of people, I don't want to be mean here, but I think a lot of people come into these games and they just shit the bed on them. And then they wonder why everything is so difficult or everything is so hard. And it's like, well, because it's still a pretty complex game. and there's ways to play it better. And I'm not trying to say that you should just metagame and car op, because to a certain extent that is self-defeating in this system. But that doesn't mean you should just phone it in. That doesn't mean you should just not have any sort of concept of mechanical strategy for your character, that you shouldn't take things that are going to give you powerful abilities that you're going to be able to utilize and to leverage the game system and even leverage the narrative to put you, in a position to win, to succeed, to, you roll with the punches and you go with the consequences. I think that's what's amazing.
Lollipop Candy tip $10. I guess now is a good time to ask questions on clocks in general. What are the nuances to the process of making and using clocks? Is the process and usage different for ones used for just one scene? For a whole session? For multiple sessions or longer?
That's a great question. All right, clocks. We'll talk about clocks. Thank you for that, by the way, Lollipop. So, Lollipop, by the way, said part of the reason I joined KLC is because Derek said people kick his ass on the Discord, and I hope, Lollipop, that you agree that that happens. I just the other week, I think, Awesome and I were very much not agreeing about certain aspects of Fabula Ultima. Historically, Ayla and I have disagreed on, quite a number of different simulationist game principles, and some of the game mechanics that I like the most are game mechanics that, she thinks cause more harm than good. So, I certainly want people to be respectful with me, but, I would be, if someone tells me to, that I'm stupid and then to get fucked. I mean, who am I to challenge that? I'd just be accepting of that. Darth said, I had a bounce for a bit during the stream, so I'm not sure if you saw it, but I did have one question that did relate a bit to temporary harm and normal harm up above. All right. So Lollipop, we will hop back to your question here in a second. Let's see if I can find Darth's question. Darth. All right, well, Darth, if you ask the question, here we go. I don't know what WO means. Wicked Ones. Okay, Wicked Ones. Lets you recover all of your stress each downtime automatically. Whereas Scum and Villainy and Blades in the Dark, you have to spend downtime actions to do so. What are your thoughts on the pros and cons of each approach? So great question. The long and the short of it is, vice indulging is a fantastic source of great role-playing moments. And it is a fantastic way to, how can I put this? Fuck with the players. Okay. And what do I mean by that? So if we look at my last Blades in the Dark campaign, which I played with Matt Holloway of Burl fame, his entire character arc came about because we kept creating complications that involved him losing his vice and having to find a new vice. Because without access to a vice, he had no way to restore his stress. So he needed to find new vice vendors. And that meant he had to keep kind of like escalating what was going on until eventually his vice became that he was a charlatan leading a fake church, that, he was basically fleecing these people of their money and their faith by leading them and being like kind of like a bad faith televangelist or something like that, it's just taking people's money. But that was his vice. And it just led to this incredibly awesome, cool, character arc that I would never have seen. Contrast that with our Scum and Villainy game, where Aaron, his character, who is sort of kind of like a Malcolm Reynolds, shepherd from Mass Effect, kind of like a former warrior, former soldier, but now on the outskirts of the galaxy, for reasons unknown. But his vice, and this doesn't sound like a vice, but his vice was communicating with his daughter, who apparently lived back in the core worlds. And he had the ability to try to, and maybe it was dangerous to contact her, and maybe it was for her or for him. We never really described it, but like the long and the short of it was his indulging his vice, lowering his stress, meant getting an opportunity to watch a holo vid from his daughter, or even to set up a, long deep space communication link and just be able to share a brief conversation with his daughter. And that would lead him to lose stress. And it kind of was like this driving force. And it became very realistic, because you're like, these characters would fall apart if it wasn't for their vice. The other thing is, for everything that I talked about the stress, one of the reasons I like it is because it feels like a real resource. I think the downside of what you're describing in Wicked Ones is I think stress in Wicked Ones would end up feeling a lot like hit points in Pathfinder 2. And I don't necessarily know that I like the way that hit points end up working in Pathfinder 2. I much prefer it to be more of a, sort of an attritive resource, something that is ablatively depleted over time, but with this ability to refresh it from time to time as well. But if you know that it's just a free refresh at the end of the score or at the end of a scene or whatever, it feels a lot like the Pathfinder 2 hit point system, which is these don't matter unless you lose them all. And I think that's a different feel than what I would want to go for. I want people to be empowered to use stress to alter the narrative, but I also want them to, at least think twice, at least think for 5 seconds before they go ahead and spend the stress, because I want it to feel like a real decision. And for Frostjack, what's up?
Frostjack tipped $5, adding on to Lollipop's question. I'm interested in what you think the strengths and weaknesses of clocks are compared to similar systems like fronts/skill challenges/VP systems.
Yeah, great. So long story short, that is how I feel about Wicked Ones and stress. And I think vice is important. And I think, especially in Blades in the Dark, I think you do want trauma. That's another great example of that. All right. Thank you for that, Frostjack. So let's talk about clocks, and let's talk about why I like them, and how to maybe talk a little bit about how to use them. So I guess we're just erasing everything. All right. So for me, the clocks is a way. So okay. Powered by the Apocalypse talks about, again, Forged in the Dark games are Powered by the Apocalypse games. It's got like this really, really, really weird coat of paint on it that sort of confuses it. In Powered by the Apocalypse, we have this idea of hard moves and soft moves. And, modern PBTA games like Avatar or Root, they go into they talk about how this is a spectrum, a continuum from really, really, really hard to really, really, really soft. And the idea basically is a hard move is immediate, and it's, impactful, right? It's right here. It's right now. It's in your face, and it's either happening, it's happened to you, or you have to deal with this right now. That you can't just put this off for later. This is an immediate thing that you need to deal with, or it's so immediate that it already happened, and now you have to deal with the after effects. You have to deal with the consequences. Whereas a soft move, now in game terms, like let's talk, that's the narrative, but let's talk realist. Let's talk as a GM. Hard moves mean the bad shit already happened. Okay. You already got kicked off the cliff. The monsters have broken through the door. You're not everyone's not dead already, but the door has been broken through and the monsters are streaming in to the Tomb of Balin. Okay. That is a hard move. That is putting, there's no going back. You've crossed the Rubicon. A soft move is basically you're fudging and you're giving the PCs another chance. That is true. But it's not fudging because it's the way that the game actually operates, right? A soft move is you basically saying, the door shudders once again, and yet another iron reinforced battle axe breaks that is holding it back. And you hear a bellowing roar as you realize that the goblins have brought a cave troll. Okay. Now, if you know your GM moves from Powered by the Apocalypse, you can see a bunch of what I was doing there, right? Which is I'm announcing future badness. I am foreshadowing a threat, right? I am escalating the situation. But the most important thing I am doing is I'm not making it irrevocable and I'm not making it irreversible. I'm giving the players more time. I'm giving the players time to do something, time to escape, time to reinforce the door, time to get ready to battle, time to, I don't know, jump down the well and try to escape that way. Time to put on the ring and go out and murder all the goblins. I don't know what they're going to do, but the point is, I'm not putting them to the task or the challenge right now, right here, has to be done. I'm giving them basically multiple outs. So a soft move is the opposite of it, right? A soft move is it's delayed. It's not as important. It's not as immediate. So that is what we have in Powered by the Apocalypse. Now, this exists as a spectrum. And again, modern games like Root and Magpie do a great job of talking about this. Clocks are just a way of graphically describing this spectrum. So what does a hard move look like? Simple. A hard move isn't the hardest move. What is the hardest move? 10, level 10 hard. Simple. A level 10 hard move is not a clock. A level 10 hard move is the players are sneaking into the Imperial facility, the Imperial cloning facility, and they need to locate the key DNA sequence. That's what their buyer is willing to pay them, to smuggle out the DNA for the clones, to see if there is a weakness that they can exploit or whatever. And I'm not in for your revolution, kid. I just want to get paid. Okay, fine. So they're sneaking in. They say, I'm going to sneak into the into the central plot processing area. And you say, okay, how are you doing that? You're like, I'm going to stay low, stay out of view, be slick, be sly. And you're like, okay, make a skulk roll. They roll badly. And you say, you're caught. Alarms are sounding. Or you might, which by the way, that's immediate. Can't go back from that. The alarms are already sounding. Red lights are spinning. Klaxons are blaring. Or you could say, kind of like Return of the Jedi, right? Where when they initially open up the doorway to the shield generator, the Empire is waiting for them and they're captured. So like you could fail this roll and be like, all right, at the last doorway, you use the secret hidden access code that was given to you, and the doors slam open, and you are faced with an entire squadron of Imperial crack stormtroopers who quickly raise guns in your face and say to immediately surrender, or they will shoot you. Right? This is immediate. This is impactful. This is no clock. Alternatively, I could think of this as a soft move. My player is infiltrating the Imperial base. I ask them, they say, I want to sneak and I want to use my skulk skill or action. And I say, cool, roll your skulk. And they roll badly. Now, I could have them be set upon by an Imperial soldier squadron. I could have all the alarm klaxons going, or I could decide to make a soft move. But what is a soft move but delayed actions? So I create, the player fails. So I create a 6 clock. I create a clock that I label alert. Okay. And God damn, that's horrible. And I throw it down into the middle of my table. And I mark it 2 segments. And I say, as you're infiltrating the perimeter, meanwhile, back up in the security central, one guardman, one light begins blinking as a motion sensor is tripped, but the guardsman is too busy with his, in a conversation. He hasn't noticed it yet amongst an entire panel of other blinking lights and gauges and dials and security camera footages. But the evidence of your infiltration is beginning to grow. What have I done? I've actually done nothing. All I've done is promise that at some future point, bad things will happen to the player. But what I've done is, instead of making it immediate and irrevocable, I've basically just said, I kind of punted. I kind of basically said, I don't want this to be a big fight, and I kind of want them to kind of infiltrate and get this thing, but I also don't want to just make it like, you automatically succeed. So I'm going to use a clock instead. A clock is your way to control the narrative. Now, there's a simulationist side to this, if you want to think of it that way, right? Where the difficulty of a clock might be directly related to the quality of their security. If we have established in our narrative that these are, maybe even it came through role playing or through skill checks made to investigate, and you learn that this, facility is underfunded and manned by, rejects from the Imperial Academy. And you say, normally I would make this a 6 clock, but I'm going to make it an 8 clock because these people aren't really that great. And so when I mark 2 segments, there's still 6 more segments before the alert is sounded. Whereas if it was 6, you'd be 4 segments away. So the answer of what is a clock? And the answer is, it's Forged in the Dark's version of hard and soft moves. A hard move is something that is happening right now, immediately, and it's going to probably result in either harm or some sort of the end of the mission, or something that is going to greatly compromise the crew or the gang from doing whatever it is they're trying to do. And the group is either going to, obviously the group has the ability to resist it, which they do not have in Powered by the Apocalypse. Again, talk about player empowerment, right? If you roll a 6- in Powered by the Apocalypse, you are at the GM's mercy. You have no recourse. Here, you can always resist. Even a soft move, even the GM ticking a clock, that is a consequence. You could resist that if you wanted to. But if you, as the game master, don't feel like this is the right time to make a hard move, if either it doesn't make sense in the simulation, maybe it doesn't make sense in the narrative, then don't make the hard move. Make a soft move. And the way you make a soft move is with the clock. You tick it a couple times because you're basically giving the player another chance. So that is kind of the secret to a clock, is it's a way, like, now the most, because, to answer Frostjack's question, like, how is it different than like a VP system? Okay. It's not. If a VP system and a clock is just literally a way of counting to 8, then it's no different. I mean, but in that case, calling that a clock or calling this a VP system is, I think, is a little bit underselling the concept, because all you're really doing is just counting how many successes you've had. That to me is much less compelling of a gameplay loop. Obviously, it could be helpful information. I'm always a believer in making clocks public because I want my players to be able to see, even if it's something that their PCs might not know, the players do. And more importantly, maybe the PCs have an intuitive sense because people in these movies and books and TV shows always seem to have some sort of sense. I'll even go so far as to say, I am fine putting out a mystery clock. Like I will put out a clock and it'll be like question mark, question mark, question mark. And if I really don't think that the players would know because it would ruin some big cool moment in the game or whatever, I will at least put the clock out there and, start ticking it as things happen. All right. And at least the players are feeling that tension. At least they get to participate in that tension building. It's not just me as the game master. Exactly, Frostjack. I've got a bad feeling about this. Anytime a character in Star Wars says, I've got a bad feeling about this, it's because that's what the PC said. It's because the player just saw the GM tick a clock that the player doesn't know about, or the PC doesn't know about. The player knows about it, but the PC doesn't. But what that reflects in the narrative is the PC going, I've got a bad feeling about this. But the player knows that, oh shit, that clock just got ticked 2 or 3 times. So, I mentioned also too, the concept of delayed as being important to soft moves. One of the principles of Powered by the Apocalypse is think off screen 2. So this is another fudge. It's not really a fudge because again, fudge means in my personal opinion, means you are cheating. You are going against the rules of the game. This is not going against the rules of the game. This is clearly the intention of the game. So one of the advantages of thinking off screen 2 is it's like there's short punts, okay, and then there's like long distance Hail Mary punts. Okay. When you've got your scoundrel and they are infiltrating the Imperial base and you've got your alert clock. Okay. And because the player just failed a roll, so you make a 6 clock, you are tracking this, but this clock is fairly ephemeral, right? This clock represents the here and now. Once this mission is over, once this, for better or for worse, once the score is over, mission is over, this clock will no longer matter. And the player clearly understands that the ticks that are occurring here are complications that are going to occur right now in this moment. And that's something as a GM, from a pacing perspective, not just in the narrative, but also from like a time perspective, like how much time do I have left in this game? How much time do I want this mission to eat up at my table? Because if I add this clock and this thing starts filling up as the player keeps rolling badly on different rolls, I am, kind of honor bound here, duty bound. I can't fill this thing up and then not deliver on the promise of the clock. That is a faux pas. Like if you, to be honest and, say what honesty demands. So, hey, Sean, what's up?
Sean C tipped $10.
Thank you, Sean. Just
want to support the channel. Watching this football game and this fit content is the absolute best way to skip commercials.
There you go. Go sports ball. Thank you, Sean. Appreciate that. So this alert is a useful tool for me to measure during the course of a single score what is going on. But it also, it could come back to bite me in the ass. Because if this score thing fills up, then I got to have the alert. And now there's going to be a combat. And now this mission is going to maybe take an extra 20 or 30 or 40 minutes at the table because now more shit everything's breaking free. That could be a cool moment, but it might not be what you intended. So that's one option. The other option is the long distance punt. Okay. This is where you create, a clock, and it's called the bounty hunter finds you or tracks you down. And this is like a 10 clock. Okay. And once you've created this, you have given yourself the freedom to basically create. You can basically tick this anytime a player fails a roll, pretty much ever. And you understand that because you're controlling the pacing of this, you only have to tick this. It doesn't even necessarily have to connect exactly to the current fiction. Maybe the player's failed roll just indicates that the bounty hunter, the player didn't do anything wrong at all. It's not like they left behind evidence. You could totally go that route, and I don't think that is a terrible way to go. But if the roll doesn't even make sense, you could still tick the bounty hunter finds you, because it just represents the fact that the player rolled low, and it's not a simulation. The action roll is not a simulation. The action roll is not a simulation. It is a narrative device to decide whether or not the PC's lives gets more complicated or less complicated. And if they roll low, or they roll a 4 or 5, then their situation gets more complicated. And partly this is just a way of sort of expressing that time has passed, you rolled low, but the bounty hunter is on your trail, and they are getting closer, and they are going to find you, and they are eventually going to track you down. But this is the kind of clock that can live out there on your table for many sessions. This is the kind of clock that your players might interact with in downtime, because they say, we need to destroy this clock, or we need to erase segments from this clock. I'm going to start a long-term project to cover our trails, create new identities. I'm going to blow up our old base and establish a new one on Hoth, right? All of these things, because the players are now involved in this kind of faction clock warfare. They have their own clocks, hopefully, long-term projects that are going to advance their goals, but they're also trying to deal with clocks that are out there ticking. Some of which, many of which, most of which, they don't want to come true. And so that is where, that kind of clock becomes a bit more like a kind of a dungeon world style front. You are announcing some amount of future badness, but whereas a front can be sort of ambivalent and it's not very clear to the players exactly how much time do we have left? How close is this thing to exploding? How to boiling over? What is right? The front is a little bit more esoteric. The front is kind of like a hidden clock, and the GM is telling the players that things are getting worse by sort of revealing or hinting at or bringing forth the impending dooms of the front, which is, I think it's fine, and it worked for a long time, and everybody liked it. I personally have found that, and this is just in my experience, I don't worry as much about the mystery or the simulation. I like for my players to be pretty well informed. My player groups have always usually been mature enough that they are able to sort of make a good faith effort to, not metagame something into oblivion. But also, to be clear, I want the players to metagame them. They're like, how would they know that the bounty hunter is after them? Have you ever watched one of these movies? Have you ever seen of course the players know that the bounty hunter is after them, right? Or someone is chasing them, or someone is hunting them. These are our heroes. They kick ass. So I actually don't mind that my players, even their PCs, know something that they might not know. And so, yeah, I think that there's kind of these two ways. And so the one is kind of to use them as a soft move. And the other option is to use it as sort of, a front, or another way to do it is sort of a campaign pacing tool. Because, and in this regard, this only works if, there are, a bunch of clocks out there, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 that are all ticking. And then the players on their sheets have their own personal clocks, projects that they want to get done. I want to upgrade the Millennium Falcon's hyperdrive. Okay, great. I want to put a better gun on the Millennium Falcon. It sucks that it doesn't have one. What the hell? Okay, cool. You can do that. So these are the things that the players are going to be driving to do. But at the same time, they're going to see these clocks out here ticking away, and that's going to drive them to make decisions. And at the end of the day, the players might choose to ignore these clocks completely and focus on their stuff. That's fine. But then this stuff will come to bear, and the players will know that they might have been able to do something about it. But the players also realize they don't have enough time. They can't be everywhere. They don't have enough downtime actions. They don't have enough time scored. If they go and deal with this, and maybe this one, they're not dealing with this one, and they're not dealing with this one. And that the players realize, man, what we choose matters. If you only have one clock and it's the victory point clock, and the players are just making checks against it, and that's the only thing that they can interact with, that is just pointless number accounting at that point. I want my players to feel like there are more clocks than they can deal with. I want them to be thinking, if you've seen Quest for the Frozen Flame, I used these 4 resources, the morale of the population, the population of the tribe, the morale of the tribe, the food supply of the tribe, and the size of their herd of herding animals. Those resources were all kind of playing into each other and off of one another. The group only had a certain amount of time because they were being pursued by the burning mammoths. Do we go and hunt and add food, or do we press on? But if we press on, we'll lose morale, and it might cost us extra food. We could kill some of our herd to give us extra food, but we need that herd to survive the winter. And you're just giving the players, there's no right answer. There's no easy answer. And the players are ultimately going to be forced into a situation, hopefully, especially in Blaze in the Dark, where they go, you know what? We need to go and blank. We need to go take this person out. We need to go and infiltrate the facility and erase the records. And that is where you get scores from. It's from the players basically going, there's only so much I can do with the clocks. At a certain point, I've just got to throw down. I've got to woman up, and we got to hop in our starship, and we got to go take care of fucking business. The score should be an opportunity for the characters to just tremendously deal with their issues. Because if they are willing to go get their hands dirty and potentially risk life, limb, ship, creds, everything in order to get something done, by God, that they are driving your campaign, and you should reward them with, tremendous amounts of victory. I remember in my last Blaze in the Dark campaign, they were a drug manufacturing gang and drug distribution gang, and they were creating a illicit substance out of the spectral ash generated when the sort of the Imperial ghost keepers who keep the city safe burn ghosts. They literally burn the spirits so that they don't become evil ghosts. And when someone dies, they literally capture their soul like a ghostbuster, and they incinerate it. And they were stealing this ash, and because they were using it to make their drugs, and it was very potent, reagent in their concoction. But I had this clock out there, which was that the spirit wardens, which is this really powerful, really dangerous force that is responsible for this. They had this clock that said the spirit wardens find out who you are and what you're doing. And this thing had been ticking up slowly, like a very slow burning match or a slow burning fuse over the course of many, many, many sessions. And finally, I had this thing ready to go. I had this thing 4 or 5, segments, filled. There was 1 segment left, or maybe 2 segments left. And the group said, you know what, we need to go do something about that. And it was okay. And they're well, we obviously can't take these people on directly because they are just way too powerful. But what if we could put the blame onto somebody else? What if we could put the blame onto our rivals? And I was sounds like you have a score. And we went immediately into the engagement role for a score to basically set it up so that their sort of drug dealing rivals were going to basically be the ones who took the fall. And as a result, not only did their rivals get wiped out because these people are really powerful and they came in force. They also essentially eliminated this clock. And they did it because the characters took action, because the players at the table took action, and they made some cool die rolls and they made some cool decisions. And there were, of course, there's no free lunches. There were, of course, consequences for that. But some of them were personal, not necessarily, I don't want to take away their success, but at the same time, when the group has a great idea and they roll a bunch of sixes and everything just seems to be going out great, sometimes you just got to go, you guys crushed it. You guys deserve your victory here. And so, yeah, I think that, the way that clocks should be viewed is like, if you've played, maybe not, it's that classic scenario where like you're playing an RPG and you're like describing how the clock is ticking down on the bomb, and the player comes in and they're like, okay, I'm going to make a disarm roll to disable the bomb. And you're like, okay, it's ticking down. And then they fail the roll. And you're like, and they're like, well, wait, how much time did you say was left? There's enough time for one more roll. And then they roll and then they still fail. And you're like, damn it. What? And then the player goes, oh, I get it. You're never going to blow me up. You're just waiting until I roll a success. And you're trying to make it seem dramatic, but I kind of see what you're doing here. Now, there's a lot of people out there who are either willingly ignorant or ignorant enough that they don't understand that is what their GM is doing. Clocks are sort of a way of formalizing that and basically being like, you put down the bomb explodes and you put down a 6 clock or an 8 clock or a 10 clock, and a bunch of things could tick it. The player fails to disarm it. And you're like, oh, it gets a 6. You're like, you make some progress. You're through the outer casing, but the clock is still ticking down. You mark 2 ticks. And you're like, at least we've got a formal definition here of when this thing fills up, that it blows up. Now, granted, this is Forged in the Dark. They could resist the consequence and still survive and be a badass. Beowulf says, nope, I just blow them up, which is fair. And to be fair, there are plenty of game systems out there where I think that is the absolute right call, because that makes that one die roll a very interesting die roll. Hey, if you succeed at this die roll, you disarm the bomb and you're the hero. If you fail at this die roll, it blows up and you're dead. Cool. Trust me, no one is going to be on their phone when that die roll is being made. People can shit on save or die all they want, but let me tell you something. When you tell somebody save versus poison or make a fortitude save, or you're dead or you're disintegrated or the death spell claims your soul, trust me, people pay fucking attention. And it's a big moment at the table. And when someone passes one of those saves, you'll see people high-fiving each other at the table. Ask yourself that. When is the last time that people at your table stood up and cheered for one another? When's the last time people at your table stood up and high-fived one another? If the answer is, well, it's been a long time or never, maybe it's time to reevaluate what you're playing and who you play with. All right. Well, I thought this was going to be a quick stream, but we ended up coming out to 10 o'clock. So thank you so much, everybody, for being a part of tonight's show. Again, appreciate everybody coming out and supporting me, especially on a night when I really didn't think we were going to get a lot of support and love, but you all are incredible and amazing. And, you always do right by me. So, yeah, I mean, thank you so much. Let's see what else. Any final comments, thoughts, questions? Yeah, I'm clocking out of the stream. Right. There was this, Derek's stamina, right? Like that clock was just depleting as the game was going on. I feel like the GM's discretion on effect in Forged in the Dark is underrated. You tell everyone the stakes up front. That's right. And not only that, Sean, I want to reiterate this. It should be a negotiation. I mean, it is ultimately, at the end of the day, the GM's decision. But I do this all the time, the back and forth, right? A player will state a course of action, and I'll say, okay, great. That is risky, limited effect. And they go, limited effect? And I go, yeah, like you're trying to snipe this guy and kill him in one shot But the truth of the matter is, like, that's really hard to do. And maybe if you were like in front of him and you had a gun in his face, but like headshotting a guy, no scope from across the room is pretty dang tough. So, you know, and then someone goes, well, okay, wait. But what if I pull out my extremely exquisite sniper rifle, which is part of my character's load gear, and I pull out my big oversized sniper rifle with a thermal imaging scanner? Then I go, okay, now you have standard effect, because yeah, you've got the right tool for the job. That back and forth and the player sort of, it's kind of a negotiation. Aaron and I do this. Aaron does this so naturally. It's honestly the reason I love playing games with Smith, is because Mr. Aaron Smith and I have been playing for so long that everything that we play, everything that we do in an RPG ends up becoming this kind of negotiation. It's kind of a risk versus reward. Aaron will say, I want this. And I'll say, okay, you're going to have to risk this. And Aaron's like, well, that's too much risk. I would like to lower the risk to this, but in return, I'm willing to take slightly less reward and I will give you this. And I go, okay, I see your offer. I like where you're going with this, but I need more of the other thing. And then Aaron's like, I can do that. He's like, okay, I will give you 5 units of this resource. And in exchange, the reward will be here, but the risk will be reduced down to here. And I go, yep, that is we are in agreement. Now let's roll the dice. Now let's see what happens. And I really enjoy that back and forth, because that back and forth could be narrative. That back and forth could be simulationist. To be clear, that back and forth is very rarely gamist. The gamist would be like, nope, this is the rule in the book. You have this bonus in this situation. The other things don't apply. Make your dice roll. That is sort of the gamist result of that. The simulationist and narrativist is where you get into kind of more of that negotiation, push and pull, right? Thank you, Lollipop. But wait, there's more. So yeah, anyways, we will be back next week again, Tuesday. I'm going to try to get Bob and Smith into the studio. And I think we're going to try to do a root retrospective debrief, talk about the stream, talk about other options. For those of you who are not members of the Patreon voted overwhelmingly for our next actual play to be Fabula Ultima. So it looks like the TTJRPG has it. So we got to figure out some of the logistics of that and who's going to be part of our crew. But it looks like Fabula Ultima is going to be the key to go. So we've got RPGs tomorrow. I'm still not 100% sure what I'm running. I don't know if I'm running Fabula Ultima or if I'm probably running Legend of the Five Rings. I don't know. But tomorrow's my Friday game with my friends, and I'm looking forward to that, as I always do. So hopefully you have a fun weekend, an engaging weekend with your friends and your family. And Brothlith, you caught the very, very end of the stream, just as I'm about to send it out. And again, I hope that everybody here, stay safe out there. And what's the word I'm looking for here? Enjoys your weekend of gaming. As a reminder, a couple weeks from now, I'm going to be heading out for my birthday to Las Vegas. So there won't be a stream. We might miss a stream or two, but it is going to be kind of a light month. We're going to talk about a lot of random stuff as we kind of are between actual plays, and we kind of we don't really have any confirmed goals here. So in other words, if you're a patron and you want to convince me to do a stream about something silly that we normally would not do it on, or something that you want to see seen, now's the time, because I'm very open and it's totally fine to do those things right now. So that's going to wrap it up for us. And I will see you next time on Knights of Last Call. Peace. 7th Sea is awesome, Neardrum.